doing with Kevin Cirilli is a lot on the immediate politics. With the video that we just saw of Justice Barrett, I thought, Kevin, I'd wander through the ages here. 48, 53, 55, 65, 66. Justice Kagan, excuse me, is 60. And then we get to those older. Clarence Thomas, 72, and Justice Breyer is 82 years old. Is there any assumption here, Kevin, that a Biden presidency brings a court back towards neutrality? Or do you put some weight in this raging debate about stacking the court?
You know, it's a great point, because I think right now in these times, we essentially had always been used to traditionally conservative or liberal Supreme Court judges. And so I think now, though, there's almost three camps on the Supreme Court. You've got the left, the right, and the middle. And the middle is really going to be what moves the needle on incredibly important cases.
Who is the middle?
Well,
who is the Anthony Kennedy right now?
I think that depends on who you ask, but I think to some extent you could argue anything I say. I think there are some scholars who would suggest someone like a Gorsuch is more to the middle right now and is an incredibly important vote. But on the Affordable Care Act case that's coming up in the week following the election, I think then we're really going to have a new understanding of the makeup of the court. But that image, if you're looking at it on the front pages of your newspapers this morning, or if you're watching via television right now, to see the president with an African-American Supreme Court justice, and of course Amy Coney Barrett as a female, that's the image in 1 week from an election that Republicans are hoping will carry the swing vote or push turnout in suburbs and remind Republicans who are very apprehensive of the president's rhetoric, of the president's approach to politics, in terms of what he is capable of delivering. It's a calculation, but it's an image that Republicans feel is something that, quite honestly, is probably more beneficial to them than that first presidential debate.
I look, Kevin, at the moment that we're in. Does any of the talk you just had play into the election? To me, they're two discrete things. Am I right?
Well, I don't know, Tom, because I think when you can't look at any of this through a vacuum. And I think if you look at the latest polls, which show Florida with a neck-and-neck, razor-thin toss-up state, a key battleground state. If you look at how Democrats are looking to expand the map, they're looking to finally turn Texas blue. You look at what's going on in the Carolinas. I don't think we have any really good idea yet in terms of what's going to happen. The president's going to be bulldozing through battleground states, holding 3 rallies yesterday in battleground state of Pennsylvania. He's going to be holding up to 6 rallies a day. This is the same playbook that he used back in 2016. Joe Biden taking a much different approach, trying to be much more consistent in terms of his messaging. He feels that less is more. According to the sources that I talked with on the Biden re-election campaign, they feel that they're in a strong position. However, they're still anxious to have a repeat of 2016.
I keep bringing this up, Kevin. I get it's the strategy. Keep the spotlight on the president. The one thing he doesn't want to talk about, COVID. It's the one thing everybody's still talking about. But in the final week of campaigning, don't you think the former VP needs to be a little bit more visible?
You know, I think it's a great point, Jonathan. And I think whenever the results of this election are determined, I think that they will either be called political masterminds or they will be called that they fumbled a massive political campaign. And I just think it's the risk that they are taking. But it is without question a massive political risk. I mean, you couldn't have more of two contrasting candidates. And I'm not talking about President Trump. I'm talking about vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, in terms of just how much you've got Harris, who loves being on the campaign trail, loves campaigning, wants to be out there, and Joe Biden, who has taken a much different approach. It is, I think, his legacy in his decades-long career as a politician, who he is now as a politician is not who he was, in the sense that he's not that retail politician that we saw, for decades, Lisa.
Kevin, in the meantime, senators all went home. We were talking about talks about fiscal support. We are no longer talking about talks about fiscal support. Everyone's just going home. What gives?
Well, you know, yesterday I was on Capitol Hill and I spoke with Senator Kevin Cramer. He's a Republican from North Dakota, and he said, Kev, I always said lame duck session is when the stimulus is going to happen. I rolled my eyes. I said, Senator, you folks were a little more optimistic in the drum up. But look, I mean, he actually made a key point here that I think if you're outside of Washington or you're waking up this morning and you're trying to figure out or price in where the fiscal stimulus is headed, he said the election, get this, the election results will inform not the first quarter negotiations, Lisa, but the lame duck negotiations. So that's a fascinating nuance in terms of how the fiscal stimulus could be informed of who has leverage in the month of December when there is stimulus. And if it's Republicans, it's going to be a much smaller price tag. But even if it's Democrats, I think that they would be willing to pass a short-term, a smaller deal, and then if Biden wins, pass a massive amount in the first quarter of next year.